The restaurant my children chose that evening was the type of place people reserved months in advance. Glass chandeliers, velvet chairs, and a menu so pretentious it barely mentioned food. I could tell right away this wasn't a family dinner. It was a performance, and I was the unwilling star. If this story touched your heart, friends, please like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more touching stories. Thank you for being here. Charles was the first to speak. He folded his napkin with the precision of someone preparing an apology or a trap. "Mom," he began softly, "we've been talking, and we think it's time you considered a more supportive living arrangement." Supportive. A word dressed in silk, but carrying a knife underneath. Penelope, sitting beside him in a glittering silver dress I had bought her 2 birthdays ago, nodded eagerly. "It's not what you think, Margaret. We just want you to relax, enjoy your life. No stress, no responsibilities." Leo, usually the quiet one, avoided my eyes completely. His fork kept clicking against his plate, a small, nervous rhythm that told me more than his words ever could. I let them speak. I let their rehearsed lines flow like overripe honey, sweet on the surface, rotten underneath. To them, I looked calm. To me, the silence I held was sharper than any blade. "You've been forgetful," Penelope added gently. Too gently. "Last week, you misplaced your keys twice, and you missed your dentist appointment." Conveniently, she forgot to mention she was the one who misplaced the keys while snooping through my drawers, and that she had rescheduled the dentist appointment without telling me. Charles leaned forward. "There's a place called Evergreen Manor. Beautiful, peaceful, professional staff. They could help you with everything." "So, you want to send me to a care facility?" I said plainly. Leo exhaled in relief, as if I had cut the rope of suspense. "It's not like that, Mom. We just think it's safer. You're 72. You shouldn't be alone in that big house." "Safer for who?" I asked. That made all 3 freeze. The waiter arrived with the food. Roasted sea bass, citrus risotto, and something green pretending to be garnish. None of my children touched their plates. They were too busy waiting for my compliance. I picked up my glass and took a slow sip, letting the golden liquid burn down my throat. I was quiet, yes, but I wasn't confused, not even close. "Tell me," I asked softly, "when would this move happen?" Charles answered far too quickly. "Tomorrow. We booked a suite for you. Everything's ready." Of course it was. "And my properties?" I asked casually. "What happens to them?" Their silence fell over the table like ash. Penelope swallowed. Leo looked away. Charles blinked too many times. "We'll handle everything," he finally said. "You don't need to worry about all that anymore." Worry. What an interesting word coming from someone who had already begun dividing my estate like slices of a pie. For months, I had intentionally let a few small confusions slip, misplacing a bill, asking the same question twice to see if my children would protect me or prey on me. Now I had my answer. I smiled, though it felt like I was lifting a 1,000-pound weight. "Well," I said softly, "thank you for dinner. I'll think about everything you said." They left the restaurant convinced they had succeeded, but they had no idea the storm they had just awakened. That night, long after they assumed I was asleep, I heard whispers coming from my kitchen, whispers that confirmed every suspicion I'd tried to ignore and revealed an even darker plan than I expected. I didn't turn on any lights when I got home. I walked through the hall, through the living room, and straight to my bedroom, moving like a ghost inside my own house. If my children believed I was fragile, forgetful, easy to manipulate, then tonight I would let them continue believing exactly that. It was nearly midnight when I heard the sound, a door clicking, soft footsteps, then whispers. My children believed I had taken the sleeping pills Penelope slipped into my purse at dinner, pills I had flushed down the sink the moment I walked inside. I stayed in my darkened room. The door cracked open just an inch, letting the hallway light carve thin lines across the floorboards. Charles's voice reached me first, low and hurried. "Check the drawer again. The property deeds have to be here somewhere." Penelope answered with irritation sharpened by greed. "I told you, I looked already. Maybe she moved them. Maybe she's not as confused as we thought." Leo scoffed. "She didn't even remember her bank appointment last week." I remembered it perfectly. I simply chose not to go, just to see who would panic. It had been Penelope. They shuffled through the house like burglars who believed they had every right to steal. I stepped closer to the bedroom door, silent as a shadow. Charles flipped through papers on my dining table. Evergreen Manor requires proof she can't manage her finances. Once she's in, we can push for full control. Full control. They had rehearsed this line too well. "And you're sure the facility is ready to take her tomorrow?" Leo asked. "Yes," Charles snapped. "They think she's showing cognitive decline. I told them she repeats herself, forgets dates, leaves the stove on. They believe all of it." Penelope chimed in, "And I talked to Mr. Henson, our lawyer. He said he can fast-track the guardianship process if we show that she's mentally slipping." My breath hitched. They hadn't hired Mr. Henson to guide me. They hired him to bury me in legal paperwork and strip me of everything I owned. Leo laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that used to belong to a sweet boy who cried during sad movies, now replaced by something colder. "I can't believe it took this long. Finally, we can breathe. And profit," Penelope added. Greed dripped from her voice like oil. My fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe, knuckles whitening. I had suspected betrayal, but hearing their casual cruelty, how easily they erased decades of sacrifice, felt like acid eating through bone. Charles shuffled more papers. "Tomorrow morning, we tell her the transport is arranged. Once she's inside Evergreen, she won't have access to any documents. Mr. Henson will visit her, get her signature on the guardianship papers, and that's it." "And the bank accounts," Penelope whispered. "We'll freeze them temporarily until guardianship is confirmed, then transfer everything." They were ready. They had planned, and they believed I was weak enough to fall straight into their trap. A sudden crash echoed. A drawer Penelope yanked too hard fell to the floor. "Quiet," Leo hissed. "She's sleeping." Penelope sighed. "Good. She won't remember any of this tomorrow. That's the point." Oh, but I would. And they would soon learn the cost of underestimating me. I stepped away from the door so quietly that even the house didn't notice. Tonight, they stole the last piece of innocence I held for them. Tomorrow, I would begin taking everything back. At dawn, before my children even woke up from their stolen celebration, I packed a suitcase, grabbed one hidden key they never knew existed, and vanished toward a secret property that would change everything. By the time the first thin streak of sunrise slipped across my curtains, I was already dressed in the sharp navy pantsuit I reserved for moments that required clarity and war. My house was silent, the kind of silence that follows a night of plotting. My children were sleeping in their own homes, confident their plan was airtight. But while they dreamed of control, I prepared my escape. I moved quickly, but without panic. Panic is for people who don't have a plan. I had spent decades building mine. I opened the false bottom of my cedar jewelry box, something Charles once mocked me for buying, calling it old-fashioned. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was the small brass key I had hidden 27 years ago. Not even my late husband knew about it. This key belonged to a house my children had never seen, never heard of, never imagined. A little coastal cottage purchased under my maiden name long before Charles or Leo learned to spell their own. A place that held secrets, documents, and a version of me they had forgotten existed. Next, I retrieved a small metal tin from behind the loose bathroom tile. Inside were my emergency essentials: my passport, $4,000 in cash, a prepaid phone with no connection to my main line, and a list of contacts I trusted more than family. Finally, I reached under my bed and pulled out the small leather suitcase I kept ready for disasters, natural or emotional. Judging by last night's whispers, this was both. I stood in the hallway and let my eyes linger on the framed family portraits. Birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Smiles that once felt real, hands once held in trust. Now they looked like evidence of a story I had misread. There was no farewell note, no dramatic message. Let them believe I wandered off confused. Let them call the police, panic, scramble. Their assumptions were my shield now. I slipped out the back door, locking it quietly. The early morning air felt colder than usual, or maybe that was just the shift happening inside me. A taxi waited at the corner, booked under a false name. The driver, a stocky man with tired eyes, loaded my suitcase without question. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked. "To Eastport Station," I replied. As the car pulled away, I watched my house shrink in the rearview mirror. A house I had built, filled, protected. Now it stood like an empty shell, occupied by ghosts of the trust I once had. The driver glanced at me. "Long trip?" he asked. "A necessary one," I said. At the station, I bought a one-way ticket to a coastal town my children had never visited. That anonymity was intentional. I chose it decades ago when I realized that love, even the most devoted kind, can sometimes curdle. On the train, I sat by the window, letting the passing landscape blur into patches of gold and green. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I had almost forgotten: control. Halfway through the journey, I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded paper tucked behind my passport. It was a handwritten note, the ink faded but legible. "If you ever need sanctuary, come home. E.W." Eliza Woodward, my loyal housekeeper, the only person who had stayed when my children pushed her out. She knew about the secret property. She knew why I had created it, and if her note still held true, she was waiting. When the train arrived, the salty breeze greeted me with memories I hadn't touched in decades. The streets were older, the paint peeling from porches, but my feet recognized the path on instinct. Then, as I reached the little yellow cottage with green shutters, I stopped. Someone had swept the porch. Fresh flowers sat in a vase by the door. The curtains were open as if expecting me. And then I saw her, a petite woman with silver hair tied in a low bun, standing in the doorway. "I knew you'd come back," Eliza said softly. "And I knew your children would force your hand sooner or later." My throat tightened. "Eliza, how long have you been here?" "Long enough to prepare. Come inside, Margaret. We have much to discuss." Inside that cottage, I discovered documents, plans, and secrets Eliza had safeguarded for nearly 30 years, secrets that would turn my children's scheme completely upside down. The moment I stepped inside the cottage, a wave of familiarity washed through me. Polished wooden floors, the faint scent of lavender oil, the soft hum of an old ceiling fan turning lazily overhead. It felt like entering a memory I had deliberately kept hidden away, untouched by time or betrayal. Eliza shut the door gently behind us. "You look tired, Margaret." "I look betrayed," I corrected. She didn't argue. Instead, she walked toward a small kitchen, pouring us both tea from a porcelain pot I didn't remember owning. The cottage felt lived in, cared for, as though she had been tending to not just a home, but to a future she believed I'd need. "Sit." Her tone was the same as it had been decades ago, firm, but with full of kindness. I sank into the cushioned chair by the window. Outside, seagulls swooped over the shore. A new day was rising, indifferent to the turmoil inside me. Eliza placed a steaming cup in front of me. "Before we talk about your children, we need to talk about you." I frowned. "About me?" She nodded. "About the woman you were before you became the woman they mistook for fragile." I didn't know what she meant until she walked to a small cabinet and pulled out a thick blue binder. Its spine was worn, but the label written in my handwriting remained clear. Whitlock Foundation Private. My breath caught. I hadn't seen that binder in 20 years. Eliza set it in front of me. "You gave this to me to protect. You said you'd come back for it if your children ever tried to use your age against you." I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were documents I'd forgotten existed, land deeds under my maiden name, investment accounts registered to a shell corporation, and the detailed blueprint of a project I once dreamed of creating, a sanctuary for older women who had no one left to fight for them. "It's all still active," Eliza said quietly. "Every account, every property. I made sure nothing expired. I knew you'd need these someday." I stared at her. "You did all this alone?" She smiled softly. "Alone is something women like us learn to do well." Something heavy loosened in my chest. This binder wasn't just protection. It was power. The kind my children didn't know existed and could never legally touch. But Eliza wasn't finished. She reached into the cabinet again and pulled out a small black recorder. She pressed play. A familiar voice filled the cottage. Penelope. Her tone smug, careless. "We just need Evergreen to sign off on the evaluation. Once in, the guardianship will be simple. Charles already has the bank forms prepared." Another voice, Leo. "After that, we sell everything. Mom loves sentimental nonsense, but business is business." Then Charles. "She won't remember any of this. It's almost too easy." The recording clicked off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply sat there, letting the truth settle into the final place inside me where hope once lived. "You had this the whole time?" I whispered. Eliza nodded. "Your children came to see me months ago. They tried to get information out of me. They underestimated how much loyalty means to me." "And you recorded them?" She shook her head. "They recorded themselves. One of them left their phone on during our conversation. It captured everything. They were too arrogant to notice." I exhaled slowly. "So you kept this as insurance?" "I kept it," she corrected, "because you deserve justice, not just escape." The cottage suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a command center. Every document, every note, every recording, a weapon forged from their own greed. I placed a hand over the binder. They think I'm walking into Evergreen Manor tomorrow, but they have no idea I'm about to walk into their lives with something far more powerful." Eliza's smile was thin and determined.
And this time, Margaret, you won't be fighting alone. With the binder, the recordings, and an old ally by my side, I prepared to contact a man my children knew never existed, an attorney who specialized in dismantling schemes exactly like the one my family planned for me.
Eliza placed her hand over mine, steadying the storm building inside me. "You remember him, don't you?" she asked. "The attorney you told me to contact only if things ever became irreversible?" I did remember, vaguely. A name tucked somewhere deep in my mind like a spare parachute packed away for a plane crash I hoped would never happen. "Jonathan Hale," I whispered slowly. Eliza nodded. "Yes, you met him years ago when you were dealing with that predatory developer who tried to steal the beachfront duplex. Jonathan stopped him without breaking a sweat." That was true. Jonathan Hale wasn't like the lawyers my children hired, men who were quick to bend ethics if paid enough. Jonathan was different. Sharp. Uncompromising. The kind of man who didn't tolerate injustice, especially against older people. But after my husband died, and my children slowly drifted from love to opportunism, I let that connection fade. I didn't think I would ever need him again. Yet here I was, about to resurrect a lifeline I had buried under years of wishful thinking. "Do you still have his number?" I asked. Eliza gave a small laugh. "I have everything you asked me to protect, Margaret, including this." She slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside, I found Jonathan's card, the original engagement contract from years ago, a retainer check I had signed and left undated, a letter I had written to myself. My own handwriting stared back at me. "If you are reading this, it means they've crossed the line. Do not hesitate." A chill slid down my spine. Eliza stood. "Call him. Now, before your children wake up and realize you're gone." I dialed the number with trembling fingers. The phone rang twice before a calm, steady voice answered. "This is Jonathan Hale." "Jonathan, it's Margaret Whitlock." A pause. Surprised but respectful. "Margaret, it's been a long time. Is everything all right?" I inhaled slowly. "No, everything is very wrong." "I'm listening." I told him. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough for his tone to shift from polite to razor sharp. Enough for him to recognize the severity. Enough for him to say a sentence that grounded me like an anchor. "Margaret, what your children planned is financial exploitation and medical coercion. If you have evidence, I can dismantle their entire scheme." Evidence? Oh, I had more than evidence. I have recordings, documents, a witness. Jonathan exhaled. "Good. You're not just ahead. You have the upper hand." For the first time since dinner at the restaurant, my lungs expanded fully. "Jonathan," I said quietly, "I don't want revenge. I want protection. And you will have it," he promised. "But first, you need to come to my office. Today. We'll prepare everything before they take their next step." I agreed. He gave me an address in a nearby coastal city, close enough to reach quickly, far enough from the places my children would search. When the call ended, Eliza placed her hand on my shoulder. "I knew he'd help you," she said. I packed the binder, the recordings, and the envelope into my bag. Then I turned to Eliza. "You're coming with me." She blinked. "Are you sure?" "You're the only person I trust right now." The truth hung between us. Heavy. Beautiful. Undeniable. We stepped outside into the crisp morning air. For the first time in days, I felt purpose replacing fear. I wasn't simply running anymore. I was preparing. As we walked toward the waiting taxi, Eliza whispered, "Your children think they know who you are." I nodded. "That's their biggest mistake." She smiled knowingly. "Then let's show them who you've always been."
At Jonathan Hale's office, I learned that my children's scheme wasn't just morally wrong, it was illegal on multiple levels, and Jonathan had a plan to turn their entire plot back on them, piece by piece. Jonathan Hale's office was nothing like the polished corporate firms my children admired. It wasn't designed to impress. No glossy floors, no wall of awards, no cold receptionist with a forced smile. Instead, the place radiated quiet strength. Thick wooden shelves lined with case files, warm lamplight, and the soft creak of leather chairs that felt lived in. When Eliza and I stepped through the door, Jonathan rose from behind his desk. He was older than I remembered, salt now mixed with the dark in his hair, and the lines on his face had deepened, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Margaret," he said, shaking my hand with both of his, "you look like a woman carrying an entire mountain." "I'm carrying my children's greed." His expression hardened. "Then let's take the weight off." We sat. Eliza remained beside me, her presence steady and grounding. Jonathan opened a legal pad, clicked his pen, and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. Every whisper I heard, every forged excuse, every manipulation, every false claim about my confusion, every step they planned to push me into evergreen manner. Jonathan listened without interrupting. His face remained neutral, but the pen in his hand tightened until I thought it might snap. When I finished, he asked one question: "Do you want to hold them accountable or destroy the entire scheme?" "Jonathan," I said, steady and certain, "I want to make sure they can never do this to me or to anyone else again." He nodded. "Then we'll do this the right way." He reached for a thick binder from his shelf and opened it to a series of legal codes marked with colored tabs. "Your children have already crossed several legal lines," he explained. He held up a finger. "First, elder financial exploitation. Even suggesting guardianship for personal gain is a violation. Planning to take control of your assets? That's a felony in our state." A second finger. "Second, medical coercion. Forcing or faking cognitive decline to put you in a facility, evergreen may be involved, knowingly or not." A third, forgery and document tampering. If they altered any forms or signatures, that's another charge. And finally, conspiracy, because they planned it as a group. Eliza gasped softly. "All four? Against their own mother?" Jonathan closed the book gently. "Unfortunately, it's becoming more common." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What do we do now?" He pulled his laptop closer and opened a blank file. "We build your case. First, I need copies of the recordings, the property documents, your medical record confirming your cognitive clarity, and a written statement from Eliza." "She'll provide all of it," I said without hesitation. Eliza nodded. "Every word, every date." Jonathan continued. "Then we prepare a legal counter-guardianship claim. Essentially, we go on record saying you're aware your children are attempting to gain control of your estate without cause." He leaned forward. "And once the petition is filed, your children won't be able to touch a cent of your assets. Not legally, not secretly, not through back doors. Everything becomes locked under court supervision until your case is reviewed." A jolt of relief hit me so hard I had to grip the arm of the chair. Locked. Protected. But Jonathan wasn't finished. "Of course, we can do more than protect you," he added. "We can expose them." "How?" He tapped the table. "By turning their own plan against them. You disappear for one day. They panic and reveal their hand. Meanwhile, we present your evidence to a judge and freeze everything before they even realize what's happening." My eyebrows rose. "Disappear?" "Temporarily," Jonathan clarified. "Enough for them to scramble. Enough for them to make mistakes. Enough for us to get ahead. Eliza gave a small laugh. You already did that part. Jonathan's eyes twinkled with approval. Good. Then we're ahead already. A new energy filled me, steel replacing the ache, purpose replacing the heartbreak. I hadn't simply escaped my children. I was now preparing to confront them. Jonathan closed his notebook. But before we proceed, there's something else you need to know. Something important. I straightened. What is it? He hesitated, only for a heartbeat. Your children have already contacted Evergreen this morning. They believe you're missing, and they're framing your disappearance as a sign of mental decline. A chill crawled down my spine. They're accelerating the process, Jonathan said, which means we need to move faster. Just when I thought I understood the extent of their betrayal, Jonathan revealed documents showing my children had taken steps even darker and more dangerous than putting me in a facility.
Jonathan slid a thin folder across his desk, plain, unmarked, almost harmless looking. But the moment my fingertips brushed its surface, a cold shiver crept up my spine, as if the paper itself carried warning. "What is this?" I asked. "Something Evergreen Manor faxed to your children early this morning," Jonathan replied. "I requested a copy before they realized you were gone." Eliza leaned closer, her brows knitting with worry. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents. The first was the initial behavioral report Charles had submitted to Evergreen, a list of supposed symptoms written in his rushed, slanted handwriting. Memory lapses, disorientation in familiar places, inability to handle basic tasks, emotional instability. Lies. Every line a blade meant to cut me out of my own life. But the second document? That one made my breath freeze. It was an authorization for emergency evaluation, a form allowing Evergreen to send a medical team to my home, forcibly, if necessary, to assess my cognitive condition in a crisis. A signature line at the bottom read, "Approved by immediate family." All 3 of my children had signed it. Eliza covered her mouth, horrified. They were planning to forcefully take you away? Jonathan nodded grimly. If you hadn't left your house before dawn, Evergreen would have shown up this morning. You wouldn't have been given a choice. My hands tightened around the paper, the edges cutting lightly into my skin. My own children, I whispered. They were ready to physically remove me? Jonathan's eyes softened, not with pity, but with understanding. This isn't just greed anymore, Margaret. It's control. Full legal dominance over your life. I forced myself to look at the third document. This one was worse. It was a temporary guardianship agreement drafted by their lawyer, the same lawyer they had kept hidden from me. It stated that due to concerning signs of declining mental capacity, my children would handle all financial accounts, property decisions, medical care, living arrangements. There was even a clause removing my authority to contest the arrangement without court permission. I felt sick. Eliza shook her head slowly. They were going to lock you away, Margaret. They weren't just planning to take your money. They were planning to take your life. I closed the folder gently because if I didn't, I would tear it apart with my bare hands. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. This confirms the strategy. They were setting you up to be legally erased. I looked at him sharply. Then let's stop them. We will, he promised, but you must be prepared for what happens next. Which is? Jonathan tapped the folder. This level of documentation means they're desperate, and desperate people make reckless choices. When they realize you're gone, they'll escalate. They'll involve the police, doctors, social workers, anyone who can help them build their case. And when they do that, I asked, then we will have everything we need to expose their intentions, he said. We will file your legal counterclaim today. Once submitted, your children won't be able to move a grain of sand from your properties. Eliza squeezed my hand. You're not alone, Margaret. Not anymore. I straightened my shoulders.
I spent decades building a life. I won't let them dismantle it because they're impatient for an inheritance. Jonathan gave a tight, approving nod. I need one more thing from you, something crucial. He reached for a blank form on his desk and slid it toward me. What is this? I asked. Power of representation. It gives me legal authority to act on your behalf in court. Once you sign it, I can lock down every asset, every document, every account under your name within the next hour. I picked up the pen. My children thought they were signing me away. I was about to sign their defeat. But just as I prepared to finalize my protection, Jonathan's assistant rushed in, breathless, to report that my children had taken a step so drastic, it threatened to unravel everything we were building, unless we acted immediately. I was seconds away from signing Jonathan's authorization form when the office door burst open so hard it hit the wall. Jonathan's assistant, a petite woman named Mara, stood there breathless, her face pale enough to drain the color from the room. "Jonathan," she gasped, "you need to see this right now." Jonathan's brows knit sharply. "Mara, what's wrong?" She held up a tablet, her hands trembling. "Your clients, Margaret's children, they've filed an emergency petition with the county court. Not next week, not tomorrow, this morning." My heartbeat stuttered. "This morning? How? I left before dawn." "That's exactly why," Mara said, swallowing hard. "They're using your disappearance as proof that you're in a state of mental crisis." Jonathan snatched the tablet, scrolling rapidly. Eliza leaned over his shoulder. "What did they claim?" Jonathan exhaled, jaw clenching. "They're telling the court you left the house confused, disoriented, and possibly wandering in a dangerous mental state. They're framing it as cognitive breakdown." My stomach twisted. "They're lying to the courts now?" Mara nodded grimly. "Not just lying, they're doing it fast. They're trying to get temporary guardianship granted before any evaluation." Jonathan slammed the tablet on the desk, not in anger, but in urgency. "This is bad," he said. "If the judge approves the petition before we file your counterclaim, they could gain temporary power over your finances within hours." Eliza's face drained of color. "Then we lose our advantage." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "We're not losing anything, but we need to act now." I took a steadying breath. "Tell me exactly what they filed." Jonathan opened the scanned documents Mara had sent. The petition stated, Margaret Whitlock is missing due to mental confusion. She may pose danger to herself if not found. Her children request emergency guardianship to protect her welfare. Evergreen medical staff are prepared to accept her immediately upon recovery. Then I saw the worst part. A signed statement from their private doctor claiming I had shown increasing signs of cognitive decline. I felt the room tilt. "That doctor hasn't examined me in 2 years, I whispered. Jonathan's eyes darkened, which means they bribed him or pressured him. Either way, it's illegal. Mara stepped forward. "Jonathan, the emergency hearing is scheduled today at 4 p.m. The air shattered. 4 o'clock. It was already late morning. If they won that hearing, even temporarily, even for 24 hours, they could freeze my accounts, lock down my assets, and paint me as unstable before I had a chance to breathe. Jonathan stood abruptly. "We're not letting that happen." His voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Eliza," he said, turning to her, "I need your written statement. Everything you've witnessed from the moment her children tried to interrogate you." Eliza nodded firmly. "I'll write every detail." "Mara," Jonathan continued, "request an emergency counter-hearing. I want Judge Remington. He's fair. He won't hand guardianship to greedy children without evidence." "I'm on it," Mara said, already typing as she rushed out. Jonathan faced me. "Margaret, you must sign this authorization now. Once you do, I can file your protection petition within minutes." I took the pen again. My hand didn't shake this time. "I refuse," I said quietly, "to let them write the story of my decline before I've even begun my fight." Jonathan's gaze softened. "This signature is your shield." So I signed, boldly, clearly, without hesitation. He grabbed the file. Good. Now we move. Before I could speak, Eliza's phone buzzed loudly on the desk. She picked it up, and her face collapsed into shock. What happened? I demanded. Eliza looked up shaken. Margaret, your children, they filed a missing person report. The police are looking for you. Jonathan froze. That means they're trying to involve law enforcement to force you into an involuntary wellness check? I felt a chill sink deep into my bones. My own children were hunting me. And as sirens began echoing in the distance, Jonathan revealed the one move that could stop everything, even the police, from taking me. But it required me to confront someone from my past I wasn't ready to face.
The sirens were getting louder, no longer distant, no longer ignorable. They were closing in on us, closing in on me, driven by the lies my own children had woven. The walls of Jonathan's office felt smaller, tighter, as if the world outside was pressing inward. But I refused to panic. I had spent a lifetime hiding my strength for the sake of peace. Tonight, I used it. Jonathan locked the blinds and faced me squarely. Margaret, listen carefully. The police believe you're in mental crisis because your children told them so. If they find you, they can take you in for an involuntary evaluation. I clenched my jaw. They want me declared incompetent. They want your life in their hands, he corrected. Eliza touched my arm gently. We won't let that happen. At that moment, Mara rushed back into the room, tablet in hand. Jonathan, they've escalated. Your kids went straight to the county investigator. They're pushing for emergency guardianship today. They're calling it a mental health disappearance. My stomach twisted. So that's what my children thought of me. A confused old woman wandering away from her home? Jonathan took the tablet, skimmed the report, and shook his head. They're reckless, they're lying, and they're scared you'll fight back. His voice was low, steady, grounding. Margaret, we can still win this. You've given me full authorization. I can shut down their attempt in court. But we need to move fast. How fast? Before the court signs anything, before the police find you. Eliza nodded firmly. Then we don't waste a second. Jonathan reached for the counterpetition he had been drafting, my shield, my defense, my voice. This document proves you are clear-minded, aware of their plan, and taking legal action. Once filed, everything they submitted freezes. They cannot touch your accounts, your home, or you. I exhaled shakily. Then we file it. But then, a loud knock jolted the door. 3 sharp, authoritative pounds. My heart leapt. Eliza's eyes widened. Margaret, that's the police. Mara froze, uncertainty spilling across her face. Jonathan moved quickly, motioning us toward the back hallway. We don't open that door. If you speak to them now, they'll take your calm words and twist them into confusion. The knocking grew stronger. Police, we need to speak with Margaret Whitlock. Eliza whispered urgently. Jonathan, what do we do? He didn't hesitate. We protect her. He guided us toward his private exit, a narrow stairwell that led to a side alley. Go. The car is already waiting. You must reach the courthouse before they do. As we hurried down the stairs, Eliza supporting my arm, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. For the first time, I wasn't running because I was afraid. I was running because I was fighting. Outside, the cold air struck my face as Jonathan's car unlocked automatically. He handed me a sealed envelope. What's this? I asked. Your evidence. Everything we need to stop them. Once the judge sees it, the case ends. I slid into the back seat as the sirens rounded the block. Eliza climbed in beside me. Jonathan shut the door firmly. Margaret, you are not powerless. Not anymore. I nodded, gripping the envelope tightly. As the car pulled away, just seconds before the police reached the building, I looked back at the flashing lights reflecting off the office glass. My children believed they could erase me with lies. But instead, they had awakened a version of me they never expected to face. A version that would not break, would not bend, would not disappear quietly. This was my life, and I was taking it back.